Chapter 10. Randy was having a pleasant, recurrent, before-the-day dream. He was awaking in a hotel in Miami Beach, and a waitress in a white cap was bringing his morning coffee on a rolling table. Sometimes the waitress looked like Lib McGovern, and sometimes like a girl, name forgotten, he had met in Miami. She was always a waitress in the morning, but at night she became an airline stewardess, and they dined together in a little French restaurant where he embarrassed her by eating 6 chocolate eclairs. She said, as always, "Your coffee, Randy, darling." He could hear her saying it, and he could smell the coffee. He drew up his knees and hunched his shoulders and scrunched his head deeper into the pillow so as not to disturb the dream. She shook his shoulders, and he opened his eyes, still smelling coffee, and closed them again. He heard her say, "Damn it, Randy, if you won't wake up and drink your coffee, I'll drink it myself." He opened his eyes wide. It was Lib, without a white cap. Incredibly, she was presenting him a cup of coffee. He reached his face out and tasted it. It burned his tongue delightfully. It was no dream. He swung his feet to the floor and took the saucer and cup. He said, "How?" "How? You did it yourself, you absent-minded monster. Don't you remember putting a jar of coffee in what you called your iron rations?" "No." "Well, you did. A 6-ounce jar of instant. And powdered cream. And believe it or not, a pound of lump sugar, real sugar in lumps. I put in 2. Everybody blesses you." Randy lifted his cup, a fog of sleep gone entirely. "How's Dan?" "Terribly sore and stiff, but stronger. He had 2 cups of coffee and 2 eggs and, of course, orange juice." "Did everybody get coffee?" "Yes, we had Florence and Alice over for breakfast. It's 10 o'clock, you know. And I put some in another jar and took it over to the Henrys. The Admiral was out fishing. We'll have to give him his share later. Helen has earmarked the broth and bouillon for Dan until he's better, and the candy for the children. Don't forget Caleb. We won't." Again, he had slept in his clothes and felt grimy. He said, "I'm going to shower," and went into the bathroom. Presently he came out, towel around his middle, and began the hopeless process of honing the hunting knife. "Did you know," he said, "that Sam Hazard has a straight razor? He's always used one. That's why his face is so pink and unscarred and clean. After I've talked to Dan, I've got to see Sam." "Why?" "He's a military man, and I need help for a military operation." "Can I go with you?" "Darling, you are my right arm. Where I goeth, you can go. Up to a point." She watched him while he shaved. All women, he thought, from the youngest on up, seemed to be fascinated by his travail and agony. Dan was sitting up in bed, his back supported by pillows, his right eye and the right side of his face hidden by bandages. His left eye was purpled, but not quite so swollen as before. Helen sat in a straight-back chair close to the pillows. She had been reading to him. Of all things, she had been reading the log of Lieutenant Randolph Rousey Peyton, heaved up from the teak sea chest during last night's burrowing for iron rations. "Well, you're alive," Randy said. "Tell me the tale. Start at the beginning." "No, start before the beginning. Where had you been, and where were you going?" "If the nurse will let me have one more cup of coffee, just one, I'll talk," Dan said. He spoke clearly and without hesitation. There had been no concussion. Each day, when he completed his calls, it was Dan Gunn's custom to stop at the bandstand in Marines Park. One of the bandstand pillars had become a special bulletin board on which the people of Fort Repose tacked notes, summoning the doctor when there was an emergency. Yesterday there had been such a notice. It read, "Dr. Gunn, this morning, Friday, 2 of my children became violently ill. Kathy has a temperature of 105 and is out of her head. Please come. I am sending this note by Joe Sanchez, who has a horse. Herbert Sunbury." Sunbury, like Dan, was a native New Englander. He had sold a florist shop in Boston 6 years before to migrate to Florida and operate a nursery. He had acquired acreage, built a house, and planted cuttings and seedlings on the Timucuan 6 miles upstream of the Bragg house. Dan pushed the Model A fast up River Road. Beyond the Bragg place, the road became a series of curves, following the serpentine course of the river. Dan had delivered the last 2 of the Sunburys' 4 children. He liked the Sunburys. They were cheerful, industrious, and thoughtful. He knew that unless the emergency was real and pressing, Herb would not have dispatched the notice. It was real. It was typhoid. It was the typhoid that Dan had half expected and completely dreaded for weeks, months. Typhoid was the unwelcome, evil sister of any disaster in which the water supply was destroyed or polluted and normal disposal of human waste difficult or impossible. Betty Sunbury said that the two older children had been headachy and feverish for several days, but not until Friday morning's early hours had they become violently ill, a rosy rash developing on their torsos. Fortunately, Dan could do something. Aspirin and cold compresses to reduce the fever, terramycin, which had come very close to being a specific for typhoid until the disease was licked, and he had the terramycin. He reached into his bag and brought out the bottle, hoarded for this moment. He could have used the antibiotic a score of times to cure other patients of other diseases, but he had always made do with something else, holding this single bottle as a charm against the evil sister. Now it would probably save the Sunbury children. In addition, he had enough vaccine to inoculate the elder Sunburys, the 4-year-old, and the babies, and just enough left for Peyton and Ben Franklin when he returned to the house. Correct procedure would be to inoculate the whole town. Dan questioned the Sunburys closely. They had been very careful. Their drinking water came from a clear, clean spring bubbling from limestone on the high ground across the road. Even so, they boiled it. All their food, except citrus, they cooked. Dan looked out at the river gliding smoothly by. He was sure the river was the villain. "You haven't eaten any raw fish or shrimp or shellfish, have you?" "Oh, no," Herb said. "Of course not." "What about swimming? Do you swim in the river?" Herb looked at Betty. "We don't," Betty said. "But Kathy and Herbert Jr., they've been swimming in the river since March." "That's it, I guess," Dan said. "If the germs are in the river, it only takes one gulp." Somewhere near the headwaters of the Timucuan, or in the great mysterious swamps from which slender streams sluggishly moved toward the St. John's, a typhoid carrier had lived undetected. A hermit, perhaps, or a respectable churchwoman in a small truck farm community. When this person's sanitary facilities failed, germ-laden feces had reached the rivers. Thus Dan reconstructed it, driving back toward town on the winding road. Dan was so absorbed in his deductions and forebodings that he failed to see the woman sitting on the edge of the road until he was almost abreast of her. He stepped on the brakes hard and the car jarred to a stop. The woman wore jeans and a man's shirt. Her right knee was drawn up almost to her chin, and she held her ankle in both hands, her body rocking as if in pain. A swatch of metallic blonde hair curtained her features. Dan's first thought was that she had turned her ankle. His second, that she could be a decoy for an ambush. Yet highwaymen rarely operated on unfrequented and therefore unprofitable roads, and had never been reported this close to Fort Repose. The woman looked up appealingly. He could have easily switched gears and gone on, but he was a physician, and he was Dan Gunn. He turned off the engine and got out of the car. As soon as his feet touched the macadam, he sensed, from her expression, that he had stepped into a trap. Whatever her face showed, it was not pain. When her eyes shifted and she smiled, he knew her performance had been completed. Behind him, a man spoke. "All right, Mac, you don't have to go any further." Dan swung around. The man who had spoken was one of 3, all oddly dressed and all armed. They had materialized from behind scrub palmettos at the side of the road. The leader was squat and wore a checked golf cap and Bermuda shorts. His arms were abnormally long and his hands huge. He carried a submachine gun and handled it like a toy. His belly bulged over his waistband. He ate well. Dan said, "Look, I'm a doctor. I'm the doctor of Fort Repose. I don't have anything you want." The second man advanced on Dan. He was hatless, dressed in a striped sports shirt, and gripped a baseball bat with both hands. "Get that, Mick," he said. "He don't have anything we want. Ain't that rich?" The third man was not a man at all, but a boy with fuzz on his chin. The boy wore Levi's, a wide-brimmed hat, high-heeled boots, and twin holster belts swung low. He stood apart from the others, legs spread, hefting a long-barreled revolver in each hand. He looked like an immature imitation of a Western bad man holding up the Wells Fargo stage, but he seemed overly excited, and Dan guessed him the most volatile and dangerous of the 3. The woman, grinning, got in the car, wrestled the back seat to the floor, and found the 2 bottles of bourbon Dan had kept hidden there. "Just like you heard, Buster," she said. "The doc keeps a traveling bar." "That's my anesthetic," Dan said. Without looking at the woman, the leader said, "Just leave the liquor in the car, rum-dum. We'll take everything as is. Start walking, Doc." Dan said, "At least let me have my bag. All the instruments and the medicines I've got are in there." The boy giggled. How about letting me put him out of his misery, Mick? He's too ignorant to live. The man with the machine gun took 2 steps to the side. Dan knew why. The car's gas tank was in his line of fire. The machine gun moved. Get going, Doc. Dan thought of everything that was in the bag, including the typhoid shots for Peyton and Ben Franklin. He took a step toward the car. He saw the baseball bat swinging and tried to close with the man, knowing that he was foolish, knowing that he was awkward and clumsy. The bat grazed his face and he tripped and fell. As he tried to rise, he saw the boy's high-heeled boot coming at his eyes, and the man with the bat danced to the side, ready to swing again. His head seemed to explode. In a final split second of consciousness, he thought, I am dead. He awoke dazed, almost totally blind, and unable to determine whether he had been shot as well as slugged and beaten. He waited to die and wanted to die. When he didn't die, he sat for a long time trying to decide which way was home. It required a great effort to concentrate on the simplest matter. He would have preferred to stay where he was and complete his dying, but the sight of ants wheeling excitedly around the drying blood on the road made him uneasy. If he died there, the ants would be all over him and in him by the time he was found. It would be better to die at home, cleanly. The sun was setting. The Sunbury house was east of Fort Repose. Therefore, he must go west. With the orange sun as his beacon, he began to crawl. When darkness came, he rested, bathed his face in ditch water and drank it too, and tried walking. He could walk perhaps 100 yards before the road spun up to meet him. Then he would crawl. Thus, walking and crawling, he had finally reached the Bragg steps. When Dan finished, Randy said, It had to come, of course. The highwaymen killed off travel on the main highways, so now they've started on the little towns and the secondary roads. But in this case, Dan, it sounds like they were laying for you personally. I think they knew you were a doctor, and you'd be going way out on River Road to the Sunburys, and certainly the woman knew you kept a couple bottles of bourbon in the car. All they had to do, Dan said, was hang around Marines Park, look at the notices on the bandstand, and ask questions. I didn't know any of them, but I think I've seen one before, the youngest. I used to see him hanging around Hochstetler's drugstore before the day. They didn't have a car? No. I guess what they wanted most was transportation. They won't get much. We only had 2 or 3 gallons of gas left. He added, apologetically, I'm sorry, Randy. I was careless. I shouldn't have stopped. I've lost our transport, our medicines, and my tools. Leaning over the bed, Randy's fingers interlocked. He unconsciously squeezed until the tendons on his forearm stood out like taut wires. He said, Don't worry about it. Worst of all, Dan said, I've lost my glasses. I guess they smashed them when the goon slugged me with the baseball bat. I won't be much good without glasses. Randy knew that Dan's vision was poor. Dan was forced to wear bifocals. He was very nearsighted. Don't you have another pair? He asked. Yes, in the bag. I always kept my spare glasses in the bag because I was afraid I might lose or break the pair I was wearing on a call. He sat up straight in bed, his face twisted. Randy, I may never be able to get another pair of glasses. Randy stood up. I've got to start working on this, Dan. What are you going to do? Find them and kill them. He said this in a matter-of-fact manner, as if announcing that he was going downtown to have his tires checked in the time before the day. Dan said, I'm afraid you're going at this wrong, Randy. Killing highwaymen is secondary. The most important thing is the typhoid in the river. If you think things are bad now, wait until we have typhoid in Fort Repose. And it's not only Fort Repose, it goes from the Timucuan into the St. Johns and downriver to Sanford, Palatka, and the other towns, if they're still there. All I can do about typhoid is warn people, which you have done already and which I will do again. I can't shoot a germ. I'm concerned with the highwaymen right now, this minute. Next, they'll start raiding the houses. It's as inevitable as the fact that they left the main highways and ambushed you on River Road. Typhoid is bad. So is murder and robbery and rape. I'm an officer in the reserve. I have been legally designated to keep order when normal authority breaks down, which it certainly has here. And the first thing I must do to keep order is execute the highwaymen. That's perfectly plain. See you later, Dan. Randy turned to Helen. Take care of him. Feed him up, he said, a command. Walking beside him toward the Admiral's house, Lib found it difficult to keep pace. She had never seen Randy look and speak and act like this before. She held his arm, and yet she felt he had moved away from her. He did not seem anxious to talk, confide in her, or ask her opinion as he usually did. He had moved into the man's august world of battle and violence, from which she was barred. She held tighter to his arm. She was afraid. The Admiral, freshly shaven and pink-faced, was in his den touching whale oil to the recoil mechanism of the automatic shotgun. "I was wondering," he said to Randy, "whether you would be around here or should I come to you. How's Dan?" "He'll be all right. We lost the car and the medicines and the last of our bourbon, but we didn't lose our doctor. The most important thing we lost were his glasses. He's very nearsighted." "You forgot something," the Admiral said, hardly looking up from his work. "We not only have lost transport, but communications. We no longer have a way to recharge the batteries. This battery I have now," he nodded at the radio, "is good for perhaps another 8 to 10 hours. After that," he looked up. "Nothing. Silence." "What do you plan to do?" "I plan to kill them, but I don't know how to find them. I came to talk to you about it." Lib said, "May I interrupt? Don't look at me that way, Randy. I'm not trying to interfere in your business. I just wanted to say I brought the Admiral's coffee. While you're talking, I thought I'd boil water and make a cup for him." The Admiral said absently, "Kettle's in the fireplace." She went into the living room. It was silly, but sometimes the Admiral irritated her. The Admiral made her feel like a mess boy. Sam Hazard laid the automatic 16 gently on the desk. "Ever since I heard about it, I've been thinking," he said. "You have to go get them. They won't come to you. Not only that, they may be 100 miles from here by now." "I think they're right around here," Randy said. "One of the gang was a local drugstore cowboy, now toting 2 real guns. And they don't have enough gas to get far. I think they'll try to score a few more times before they move on. Even when they're gone, others will come. We have the problem whether it's going to be this particular gang or another gang. I'm going to try to form a provisional company." "Vigilantes?" "No, a company under martial law. So far as I know, I'm the only active Army Reserve officer in town, so I guess it's up to me." "Then what do you do?" Lib came in and set up a cup beside each of them. She found a clear space at the far end of the room-length desk, boosted herself up, and attempted to appear inconspicuous. "Suppose I organized a patrol on foot." "Set up roadblocks?" Randy suggested. "The highwaymen are mobile. You're not," the Admiral said. "If they see an armed patrol or a roadblock, they'll simply keep out of your way." Randy said, "Well, we can't just sit here and wait for them." "All this I've been thinking," the Admiral said. "Also, I was thinking of the Q ships we used in the First World War." Lib started to speak, but decided it would be unwise. It was Randy who said, "I remember vaguely reading about Q ships, but I don't remember much about it. Enlighten me, Sam." Q ships were usually auxiliary schooners or worn-out tramps, targets on which a German submarine captain wouldn't be likely to waste a torpedo, but would prefer to sink with gunfire. Concealed a pretty hefty battery behind the screens that looked like deck loads. Drill was to prowl Submarine Alley unescorted and helpless-looking. The sub sees her and surfaces. Sometimes the Q ship had a panic party that took to the boats, best part of the act. Soon as the sub opened fire with its deck gun, the Q ship ran up the flag and unmasked the battery. Blammy! It was quite effective. Very ingenious. But what has it got to do with highwaymen? Nothing at all unless you can put a 4-wheeled Q ship on the roads around Fort Repose. Randy shrugged. "We're not mobile. Plenty of cars we could use, for instance yours, Sam, but gasoline is practically non-existent. We might have to cruise around for days before they tackled us. I might be able to requisition a gallon or 2 here and there, but then word would get around and they'd be watching for us." Lib had to speak. "Can I make a suggestion? I think Rita Hernandez and her brother must have gasoline. They're the big traders in town, aren't they?" Randy had tried to wipe Rita out of his mind. They were even. They were quits. He wanted nothing from Rita anymore. He said, "It's true that if anybody's holding gas, it's Rita." "Not only that," Lib said, "but they have that grocery truck. Can you imagine anything more enticing to highwaymen than a grocery truck? They won't really think it's filled with groceries, of course, but psychologically, it would be irresistible." Sam Hazard smiled with his eyes as if the light from within penetrated the opaque gray. "There you have it, Randy. Nice staff work, my girl." "Also," she said, "I think it would be a good idea if I drove. They'd be sure to think it was easy pickings with a woman driving." "You will like the devil drive," Randy said. "You will stay at home and guard the house, you and Ben Franklin." And the two men went on talking and planning as if they already possessed the truck with full tank and she was left out of it again. At least, she thought, if it really worked, she would have contributed something. The Admiral emphasized that whatever was done must be done quietly. Randy decided that he could not go to the Hernandez house until after dark. It was not impossible that the highwaymen were holed up in Pistolville or had contacts there. If Pistolville saw him drive off in Rita's truck, the news would be all over town within a few hours. Finally, the Admiral asked the crucial question. Would Rita cooperate? Was she discreet? Rita wants to hold on to what she has, Randy said. Rita wants to live. She is realistic. There was one more thing which he must do before he left the Admiral. He sat down at the typewriter and pecked out the orders. Order number 1, Town of Fort Repose. In accordance with the proclamation of Mrs. Josephine Van Brooker Brown, acting President of the United States, and the declaration of martial law, I am assuming command of the town of Fort Repose and its environs. All Army, Navy, and Air Force reservists and all members of the National Guard, together with any others with military experience who will volunteer, will meet at the bandstand at 1200 hours, Wednesday, 28 April. I propose to form a composite company to protect this town. Order number 2. 1. 2 cases of typhoid have been diagnosed in the Sunbury family, Upper River Road. It must be assumed that both the Timucuan and the St. John's are polluted. 2. All water will be boiled before drinking. Do not eat fruits or greens that have been washed in unboiled water. Order number 3. 1. Dr. Daniel Gunn, our only physician, has been beaten and badly robbed by highwaymen. 2. The penalty for robbery or pillage, or harboring highwaymen, or failure to make known information concerning their whereabouts or movements is death by hanging. All these orders he signed. Randolph Rousey Bragg, 1st Lieutenant, AUS Reserve, 026588988. Lib, reading over his shoulder, said, "Why wait until Wednesday to form your company?" "I want the highwaymen to think they have plenty of time," Randy said. "I want them to laugh at us." There was a number of ways by which Randy could have traveled the 3 miles to Marines Park and then the 2 additional miles to the Hernandez house on the outer fringe of Pistolville. The Admiral had offered to take him as far as the town dock in his outboard cruiser, now converted to sail, but Sam Hazard was not yet added additional keel to the boat, so it would side-slip badly on attack. Sam could get him to Marines Park all right, but on the return trip might be unable to make headway against the current and wind and be left stranded. Randy could have borrowed Alice Cooksey's bicycle, but decided that this might make him conspicuous in Pistolville. He could have ridden Balaam, the mule, but if he succeeded in persuading Rita to let him have the truck and gasoline, how would Balaam get home? Balaam didn't fit in a panel truck. Besides, he was not sure that Balaam should ever be risked away from the Henrys' fields and barn. The only mule in Timucuan County was beyond price. In the end, he decided to walk. He set out after dark. Lib escorted him as far as the bend in the road. She had tacked his notices firmly to a square of plywood which he was to nail to the bandstand pillar. Thus, she had explained, they would not be lost or overlooked among the offers to trade fishhooks or lighter flints, and the pleas for kerosene or kettles. Across the top of the board she had printed official bulletins. Randy wore stained dungarees, old brown fishing sneakers, and a floppy black hat borrowed from Two-Tone. His pistol was concealed in a deep pocket. When walking Pistolville at night, he wanted to look as if he belonged there. When he told Lib that it was time to turn back, she kissed him. "How long will it take you, darling?" she asked. "Depends on whether I get the truck. Counting the stop at the deck to nail up the orders, I should get there in less than 2 hours. After that, I don't know. Depends on Rita. If you're not home by midnight," she said, "I'll come after you," with a shotgun. She sounded half serious. In the past few weeks, she had been more tender to him, embarrassingly solicitous of his safety, more jealous of his time. She was possessive, which was natural. They were lovers when there was time, when place and privacy, and respite from fatigue and hunger and the dangers and responsibilities of the day. He walked on alone under the oak arch, excluding starlight, secure in the night's black velvet cloak, yet walking silently, eyes, ears, and even nose alert. So he had learned, in the dark hammocks as a boy hunting game, in the dark mountains as a man hunting man. Before the day, except in hunting or in war, a 5 or 10-minute walk would not have been thinkable. But now it was routine for all of them except Dan, and after Dan got out of bed, it would become routine for him too. but all their shoes were wearing out. In another month or two, Ben Franklin and Peyton would be without shoes entirely. Not only were the children walking, or running, everywhere, but their feet inconsiderately continued to grow, straining canvas and leather. Randy told himself that he must discover whether Eli Blostein still held shoes. He knew what Blostein wanted: meat. Marine's Park was empty. As he nailed up his order board, an animal scuttled out from under the bandstand. At first he thought it was a possum, but when he caught it, its silhouette against the starlit river, he saw it was an armadillo. Walking through the business section, he wondered whether armadillos made good eating. Before the day, he had heard someone say that there were several 100,000 armadillos in Florida. This was strange, because before the first boom, there had been no armadillos at all. Randy's father had related the story. Some real estate promoter on the East Coast had imported 2 from Texas for a roadside zoo. Knowing nothing about the habits of armadillos, the real estate man had pinned them behind his chicken wire. When darkness fell, the armadillos instantly burrowed out, and within a few years, armadillos were undermining golf greens and dumping over citrus trees from St. Augustine to Palm Beach. They had spread everywhere, having no natural enemies in the state except automobiles. Since the automobile had all but been extinguished by the hydrogen bomb, the armadillo population was certain to multiply. Soon there would be more armadillos than people in Florida. It was Saturday night, but in the business blocks of Yulee and St. John's, no light showed, nor did he see a human being. In the residential area, perhaps half the houses showed a light, but rarely from more than one room. He had not seen a moving vehicle since leaving home, and not until he reached the pine shanties and patchwork bungalows of Pistolville did he see a person. These people were shadows, swiftly fading behind a half-open door or bobbing from house to house. It was night, and Fort Repose was in fear. He was relieved when he saw the lights in the Hernandez house. Anything could have happened since he and Dan had stopped there. Pete could have died and Rita could have decamped, or she could have been killed, the house pillaged, and everything she was holding, including the trunk and gasoline, stolen. He knocked on the door. "Who is it?" Rita's voice said. He knew she would have the shotgun up and ready. "Randy." She opened the door. She was holding a shotgun, as he guessed. She stared at his costume. "Come in." "Looking for a handout?" "In a sense, yes." "What happened? Your 2 women run you off?" As she laid down the gun, the burn still showed on her ring finger. He said, "How's Pete?" "Weaker." "How's Dr. Gunn?" "You heard about it then?" "Sure. I hear all the bad news in a hurry nowadays. We call it lip radio." The word had come to town, Randy guessed, via Alice Cooksey earlier in the day. Just as Alice brought the town news to the River Road, each day she carried the news from River Road to town. Once spoken in the library, the news would spread through Fort Repose, down street to street and house to house. He said, "You know Dr. Gunn lost his bag with all his instruments and what drugs he had left, and his glasses. So if we can, we have to get those highwaymen, and that's why I came to you, Rita." "They're not Pistolville people," she said. "These Pistolville crackers hardly have enough gumption to rob each other. Now, I heard them described, and one of them, the young one with 2 guns, was probably Leroy Settle, a punk who lived on the other side of town. His mother still lives there, I think. Maybe if you stake out his house, you'll get a shot at him." "I don't want him in particular," Randy said. "I want them all. I want them and everybody like them." And he told her what his plan was, exactly, and why he must have the grocery truck and gasoline, if she had any. He knew he must trust her entirely or not at all. She listened him out and said nothing. "If you are left alone here, Rita," he said, "with all the canned food and other stuff you've got, you are bound to become a target. When they've cleaned out what's on the roads, they'll start on the houses." "I'm way ahead of you." Her eyes met his steadily. She was evaluating him and all the chances, all the odds. She made her decision. "I think you can get away with it, Randy." "You're holding gas, then?" "Certainly I'm holding gas. 15 gallons under the back steps. You can have it and the truck. Anything you don't use, I expect back." He rose. "What are you going to tell people when they see your truck is gone?" "I'm going to tell them it was stolen. I'm going to tell them that it was loaded with choice trade goods and that while I was in the bedroom attending to Pete, somebody jimmied the ignition and stole it. And to make it sound good, I'm going to let off a blast with this gun when you whip out of the driveway. The news will get around fast, don't worry. It'll get to the highwaymen and they'll be looking for the truck. That should help, shouldn't it?" "It should make it perfect." "Go out the back way. Load the cans in the back of the truck, quietly. There's enough gas in the tank to take you out River Road. I'll salute you when you hit the street." He said, "You're a smart girl, Rita." "Am I?" She held out her left hand to show the black circle left by the radioactive diamond ring. I've got a wedding band. I was married to an H-bomb. Will it ever go away, Randy? Sure, he said, hoping it would. Dan will look at it again when he's better. He walked through the hallway and kitchen and out into the darkness. He found the 3 5-gallon cans under the back steps, opened the truck's rear doors, and silently loaded the gasoline. He got in and stepped on the starter. The engine turned over, protesting. Rita had been careless, he guessed, and had forgotten to fill the battery with distilled water, for it was close to dead. He tried again, and the engine caught. He nursed the choke until it ran smoothly, backed out of the Hernandez carport and turned sharply in the yard, shifted gears, and roared out onto the street. He glimpsed Rita's silhouette in the doorway, the gun rising to her shoulder, and for an awful instant he thought she was aiming at him. Red flame leaped out of the muzzle. At the first corner he cut away from Augustine Road and followed rutted dirt streets until he was clear of Pistolville. He saw no other cars in motion on the way home. It was past 11 when he drove the truck into the garage and closed the doors so no casual passerby or visitor would see it. The lights were out in Florence's house, and in his own house only a single light burned in his office window. That would be Lib, waiting up for him. He had urged the women to get to bed at their usual hour or earlier, for they planned to go to the Easter sunrise services in Marines Park. This was good. It was good that they should all be there, so that no one would guess of unusual activity out on River Road. From a less practical standpoint, he felt good about it, too. He was, as a matter of fact, surprised at their anticipation and enthusiasm. Many things had happened in the past few days, and yet their conversation always came back to the Easter services. People hadn't been like that before the day. He could not imagine any of them voluntarily getting up before dawn and then walking 3 miles on empty stomachs to watch the sun come up, sing hymns, and listen to sermons, however short. He wished he could walk with them. He couldn't. It was necessary that he remain there to complete his plans with Sam Hazard and to also work on the truck. Walking toward the house, he wondered at this change in people and concluded that man was a naturally gregarious creature and that they were all starved for companionship and the sight of new faces. Marines Park would be their church, their theater, their assembly hall. Man absorbed strength from the touch of his neighbor's elbow. It was these reasons, perhaps, that accounted for the success of the old-time Chautauquas. It could be that and something more, the discovery that faith had not died under the bombs and missiles. She wasn't upstairs. She was waiting in the gloom of the porch. She said, "I saw you drive it in. It's beautiful. Did you get the gas to go with it? Total of 17 gallons, including what's in the tank. We can cruise for a day or two if we take it easy. Are you tired, darling?" "Not too. If you're going to be up at 5 with the others, you really ought to be in bed." "I've been waiting for you, Randy. I worry. I'm not tired, really." They walked through the grove down to the dock. The river whispered, and the quarter moon showed its profile. The stars moved. She lay on her back, head resting on her locked fingers, looking up at the stars. His eyes measured her, long, slender, curved as if for flight, coppery skin, hair silvered by the night. "You're a beautiful possession," he said. "I wish we had a place of our own so I could keep you. I wish we had just one room to ourselves. I wish we were married." Instantly, she said, "I accept." "I'm not sure how we'd go about it. Last I heard, the courthouse in San Marco wasn't operating. For a while, it was an emergency shelter like our school. I don't know what they use it for now, but certainly not for issuing marriage licenses, and the county clerk has disappeared. I heard in the park that he took his family and started for an uncontaminated zone in Georgia where he used to live." Without moving her head, she said, "Randy, under martial law, can't you make your own rules?" "I hadn't thought about it." "I suppose so." "Well, make one." "You're serious, aren't you?" "I certainly am. It may be old-fashioned, before-the-day attitude, but if I'm going to have children, I'd like to be married." "Children? Are you going to have a baby?" Thought of the difficulties, dangers, and complexities of having a baby under their present circumstances appalled him. "I don't know. I can't say that I am, but then again I can't say that I'm not, can I? I would like to marry you tomorrow before you go off chasing highwaymen." She turned on her side to face him. "It isn't really convention. It's only that I love you very much, and that if anything happened, I don't have any bad premonitions, dear, but you and I know that a bad thing could happen. Well, if anything happened, I would want the child to have your name. You'd want that too, wouldn't you?" "Yes," Randy said, "I would want that very much. I'm not going to put the truck on the road until late in the afternoon. That's when the highwayman took Dan, so there'll be time." "That's nice," she said. "It'll be nice to marry on Easter Sunday." He took her hands and drew her up and held her. Over her shoulder he saw a pair of green eyes and a dark snout sliding downstream past the edge of the dock. It was spring, and the gators were out of their holes. He had heard somewhere that the Seminoles ate gator meat, cut their tails into steaks. It was a source of meat that should be investigated. He knew he shouldn't be thinking about food at a time like this, but he was hungry again.